Hello, my name is Zan Heiser, and today I'm going to go in a brief summary and some explanation of fire protection systems. I'm going to try to keep this short as I can because there's a lot of information in this in fire protection systems. So, fire protection system, the main purpose of it, as the title is, it's to protect your property, your house, or structure against fire or prevent fire altogether. And you can do this in many ways. Why it matters? Well, no one wants their house to be burned down. It's so much easier to just prevent that to begin with, and it can save lives too. You can look up many events in history where people have died due to fire protection systems not being installed in the area, or them not just simply existing at the time. That's why we have them now, because of events like that in history. The design aspect of it is mainly you put them in the last, from my experience, first-hand experience when I was working in that field still. And the reason for this is because if you are installing fire protection systems, not every room is equal. There's hierarchies kind of to it. Some rooms require more, some rooms require less. And you don't want to have overkill everywhere because it's expensive, costs more labor, and it'll hold up taking more time to install it, and more maintenance because you do have to maintain the systems. So you wait until the structure is nearly built, and you go off the rooms based on what the homeowner says and your blueprints say. You will go off that to determine what rooms get fire protections and what degree or advancements of protections it gets in that case. Some of the components you see is sprinklers. These are not all of them, but there's a good chunk of them is sprinklers, fire alarms, smoke detectors, fire hydrants, which is not installed by the homeowners or property owners, but more by the city, but it's still a component of fire protection, fire extinguishers, and even the material you build out of. So let's get into how some of these work. So sprinklers. This is a sprinkler here. If you can see my mouse cursor going around it. You mainly see this part because most people do not see this. This is an industrial building. That's why it's exposed because industrial buildings don't gotta be pretty. They just gotta function. So it's easier just to put them on the outside like this. But in your houses and offices and stuff, you'll just see this part, and this will be tucked in above the ceilings or ceiling tiles, depending on what you have. And the way this works is when your fire detection system kicks in, detects a fire, there will be water in this, and it will trigger this to open, spraying the area or room with water, trying to suppress the fire or stop it altogether. Depending on the age of the building, either this will be hooked up to the main water line, which they all should be hooked to the main water line at least, and or have its own tank of water on the roof or somewhere in there hooked up to a pump to pump the water through it. Older buildings, most of them that I've dealt with, do not have the tanks. They're just hooked up to the water lines. But the newer ones, I've seen the newer ones have both, where I have a tank hooked up here for emergency in case you lose water. So these will still function and also be hooked up to the water line. These are a little more handheld for smaller fires, fire extinguishers. I recommend everyone have one of these in their kitchen. Um, if you ever have a grease fire and you ever try to put water on it, it makes it 10 times worse. These are designed for that. Grease fires, electrical fires, all that stuff that water will not do, and it's small enough you can stop it by hand without having to call in bigger stuff like sprinklers. They just work flawlessly. You do have to maintain them, as in you have to replace them so many years because the chemicals, I don't know the exact reason why, but I guess the chemicals dilute in them and they just don't stop working as well. These don't prevent fires, but they will help you in the case of a fire. Exit signs and emergency lights. So if you have a good examples is an electrical fire that starts in your panel box. If that panel box catches on fire, you lose power to your whole building. And if you do that, you have no lights, no nothing. So these are battery powered on their own separate thing. So if you lose all the power, it will trigger a thing in them showing, hey, we have no power, and cause them to kick on. So you'll be able to see where you're going, and it'll be able to mark the exits where you're going. These are smoke alarms and or fire alarms, depending on which kind you get, because they all look about like this, but some of them detect more things than others. Just it depends on the brand and which ones you get. It's pretty self-explanatory, and these a lot of people have these in their household. They detect smoke, and when they do, they start going off, letting people know, hey, there's a fire somewhere. Um, New houses ones are different from older houses. The new houses we have to hardwire them. It is code. You have to hardwire them on their own circuit, like you do light switches and stuff like that. So that when they're going all the time, when you have power, they're not using the battery. Whereas older ones, they're only battery powered. Newer ones, they're battery powered and hardwired. And the benefits of this is when you're not using the battery, when you lose electricity, you have a freshly charged battery that's never been used, so they last much longer. This you see in more public spaces and industrial spaces. If you see a fire and you cannot contain it with an extinguisher, what you do is you pull these down, which some of them are push buttons and stuff. They all look different, but generally it's a red box that'll say fire alarm on it. You will activate it, and it will activate these systems manually if they have sprinklers and your alarms and all this stuff manually, and it will suppress the fire if it can, if it's caught early enough. This is a fire hydrant. These ain't really installed by homeowners and stuff like that. It's more installed by cities and whatever county you work in. But this is for firefighters to use against the fire. If these systems have failed and a fire truck has access to this, they can hook up to this, which will hook into the main water line. Mainly in cities, you see mainly in cities, they'll hook in the main water line and they'll be able to suppress it from the outside using this. Design requirements are different for residential and commercial office buildings. Go a little quick in here. Houses, if you are only doing smoke detectors, which is the bare minimum, if you only use smoke detectors, you have to have one on every floor. So if you have a basement, you have to have one in the basement. You have to have one in attics if the attic is finished. Whereas if you don't know what that means, it means if the attic has walls in it and stuff and you can't see insulation and it has lights in there you can get in there, you have to have one in there. You have to have them in bedrooms, in hallways or walkways in front of bedrooms, and any room that, like stairways and stuff like that, any room that you can walk through kind of. Sprinkler systems, not as common, but some people do have them in their houses. You have to have them in same areas, bedrooms, hallways, stairways, stuff like that. Whereas commercial, it more depends on the size and the application of the building. Bigger areas have to have alarms and sprinklers, whereas if it's smaller, they can get by just having alarms. It just depends on the population and foot traffic you plan on having in that building determines it. But they're similar, but it's not set to rooms. It's more set to size of people in that room. Some cases where fire protection did its job was one case in 2022, apartment complex in Palatine, I guess that's how you say it, in Illinois. A furnace started a fire in one of the apartment buildings, and sprinklers were able to stop it before it spread to the whole building. Which most people ain't gonna hear about these because you're going to hear about the bad mostly in the news. That's just how the news works. But the sprinkler system kicked in and it was able to save the day and stop the apartment complex from burning completely down. Another one was in St. Paul, Minnesota in 2025. Someone had a grease fire in a kitchen and they had a sprinkler system in their apartment complex. This is another apartment complex, and it was able to do the same situation. It kicked in, saved the day. No fire. Both of my knowledge, what I could read on both of these, neither of them had any serious injuries, and no one died in them. So pretty much a reflection. From doing this insight and personal work that I have done, if you really look into it, the fire protection systems have greatly advanced over the years, and just crazy to think how much we've advanced from when they first started using only barely a water hose that you hooked up to outside and you ran it into the building, compared to now having full systems that will spray chemicals and everything. And just the importance of fire protection systems. It is super important to have them. They will protect you, your loved ones, your property, everything you need. They will protect it if it's in that system. That's why it's important to have them installed properly and use them. But with that being said, that's all I have to say about this. Try to be as quick as I can and clear, but thank you for your time.